Hey, on our podcast today, we're going to talk about a growing problem here in America, and that is the prevalence of Islamic attacks against United States citizens. And we're starting to see something that I think is a really good trend. We've had a number of our leaders in Congress who are finally speaking out about this cultural suicide that's happening as we just allow millions and millions of folks who share a completely different worldview. Actually, it's a worldview that is outspoken about killing us, killing Westerners, killing Christians, killing all those who do not agree with Islamic ideology. This is what has been called cultural suicide, and I think they're right. Of course, the left is against all of this. The left is calling us Islamophobes, and anybody that speaks out in common sense against the horrific attacks that we've been seeing against American citizens. We're going to have a lot to talk about on our podcast today. I hope you'll tune in.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Thanks, you guys, for turning in. We just finished an incredibly awesome weekend of ministry. Of course, we're recording this on early Monday morning, and so everything is fresh in our minds. But what a great day! We're just kind of rehearsing what the Lord's been doing here at Living Stones, and had a full day yesterday. But after 3 services, lots of ministry at the altars, a full house. Man, second service was packed to the rafters, and a big day for me personally. My mama back in the sanctuary, which was great. That's been a long journey for her from the end of October till now. Mid March. That was really, really exciting. Plus, it was great having Nate and Jen's son Riley back in the building. He's been battling a strange liver kind of situation, but God's healing him. He was back in the building. It was a great day in terms of just family. And again, I shared with you, we had just under 50 people that were there for our starting point, which is people that are new at Living Stones and are looking for a church family. That was awesome. We ended the day, like I said, full day. We ended the day sitting in the middle of a torrential downpour. I mean, there was no leaving that meeting early. Everybody's stuck in that building because it was crazy last night. Yeah. But just our amazing life group leaders. I want to give a shout out to all you guys. Thank you for loving our people so well. That was absolutely incredible. So full day.
Yeah. We just closed off our, winter life group semester, 10 amazing weeks, touched a lot of people, and we have a little bit of respite before we begin our spring life group semesters.
Yeah, so if you're not in a life group, we encourage everybody to get connected. That's so huge. We believe small groups and relationships that happen in those groups are just absolutely essential, for spiritual growth. So as Pastor Andrew said, we're taking a break here till after Easter, picking it back up after Easter. But that's another thing we need to talk about. Resurrection Sunday, just around the corner.
Just around the corner, and, a couple weeks away.
So be inviting your friends out, family out, people that may be unchurched or unsaved. It's going to be an incredible weekend of celebration. So praise the Lord for that.
But even starting point is part of our growth track. For people who are attending our church and just getting to know us, starting point is kind of like the next level. You want to get to know our leadership, know our culture, know our values. If you haven't been to a starting point, we'd love for you to get connected. It's a starting point. It's the next step.
Absolutely. So. We did good on that one. Like, hey, where do we begin around here? Starting point. It's not that hard to figure out.
The name describes itself pretty well. Absolutely. So.
Amen. One of the things we're going to be doing that I'm pretty excited about is, and if you've heard me curse the clock for many, many years here at Living Stones, that is an indication that there is much more to be shared than we have the time to share on Sunday morning, which is unfortunate. We would like to start pivoting on our podcast here to kind of go into more more detail on some of the things that just, weren't able to get squeezed in. And as it relates to the sermon on Sunday, and as it relates to, again, pivoting into what's going on in our culture. So I think you're going to see some really fun, changes that are forthcoming in our podcast format. Certainly not changing what has been working or what you all enjoy, but just trying to make it better. So a little teaser there for you guys. You'll see more about that. But let's get back to Sunday. We talked about courage. It's amazing to me that at the end of Jesus' life, kind of like at the end of Paul's life, I mean, Paul kind of felt deserted and abandoned and left alone and in prison, and does anybody care? And Jesus certainly walked through that before Paul did. There on the cross, 5 people surrounding him. Everybody else is gone. And what was especially instructive to me and eye-opening was that 4 out of the 5 were ladies. That's kind of crazy. We talked about the purpose of the cross, not only to kill people, but to intimidate others, the living. Don't do this. Don't be associated with that guy, or you're going to face perhaps the same ending.
And you mentioned something really profound, which is courage is really inspired, not necessarily by anger, but by love, or more powerfully by love.
Yeah.
When you love deeply, courage is not the absence of fear, right? Courage is facing fear,
right?
And love is the opposite of fear. Love is the antidote to fear. So I think that's a great tie-in. That courage, the source of courage, is actually deep love. And I look at these ladies, these women around Jesus. It's very interesting because people talk about how Christianity is patriarchal and degrades women, and they just have no context of the historical worth and value Christianity has brought to women.
Absolutely.
The reason these women love Jesus so much, that they stay when some of these disciples and the apostles are no longer there, in my opinion, is because Jesus has so elevated. Jesus has spoke to these women like they have never spoken before. Jesus has transformed the status of womanhood like never before.
Yeah.
They love him so deeply because he has touched them so deeply as not just as women, but as daughters, that they cling on to him even at his weakest and his most vulnerable.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. He cherishes them, treats them with dignity and respect. Just the way that he interacts with ladies, elevates ladies. Comes to their defense when culture is mistreating them, is really powerful. But when you think about courage, I tend to think of courage. If you had to say, is courage a masculine quality or feminine quality? Not that it's not both, but I think we would tend to think of like storming the beach at Normandy. Just crazy courage, running into the most dangerous of situations, and doing it for the love of your country or whatever. But even there, what I just said was instructive. It goes back to not that you hate whoever your enemy is, but that you love your family, you love your nation, you love what your nation stands for. So while hate can be a powerful emotion, love is a more powerful emotion, and love doesn't, count the cost, so to speak. Love simply says, I'm going to be there. I'm going to stand at the foot of this cross because I am driven here by my great love for Jesus. And it was eye-opening, at least for me, to think about that here 4 out of the 5 are ladies, and that the 5th person, who is John, who refers to himself over and over again as the disciple whom Jesus loved, is there as well for the same motivation. He has been transformed, by the crazy, awesome love of Jesus, and he's there. He shows up, even though it could cost him. And we know how John's life ended. He was boiled alive as a follower of Christ. The oil did not kill him. What's the word I'm looking for? The torture that they intended did not work, and that's why he was banned to the island of Patmos, where he had the revelation of Jesus in that amazing book of Revelation. But anyway, he was motivated by love as well, and so it's really powerful to think about how one touch from Jesus can transform us, into radical, devoted followers. That's, I think, something that we're all after.
Yeah.
So anyway, a great Sunday morning, a lot of celebration, and I really want to encourage you all to, if you're not plugged in locally to a great church, get plugged in, be part of the family, and if you're close to Living Stones, or you can watch us online on a regular basis, we encourage you to do so as well. So let's get into what's been going on in our nation today. I will start off here with a headline. This was from Fox News. Multiple federal sources confirmed that a suspected ODU shooter, they give his name, is a naturalized U.S. citizen from Sierra Leone who was convicted in 2017 of providing support to ISIS. So here's a guy that is undermining the United States government. He was convicted for working hand in glove with ISIS, which is a wicked terrorist organization. He was released. This is amazing to me. Released in 2024. And here's what the DOJ said after his arrest in 2016. This guy praised the gunman who killed 5 U.S. military members in a terrorist attack in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That was back in 2015, and stated that he had been thinking about conducting a similar attack to the November 2009 attack at Fort Hood, Texas. So what's amazing to me is, first of all, these are naturalized citizens, so we've allowed them in our country. They consider themselves Americans. We let them in our armed forces to defend this country, and then they end up murdering their fellow servicemen and women in the name of Allah. So clearly what has happened here is a failure to assimilate. To put it lightly, these guys are not, when push comes to shove, they don't love the United States. They're not here to defend the United States. And somehow we're letting these people into a most sensitive area of our nation, which is our national security and our military. And we're seeing over and over again, these types of Islamic attacks against our own people, which doesn't really help the morale of your servicemen and women when you are questioning whether the people around you can be trusted. That should be a tight-knit, trust-based environment. I came across a quote that somebody had reposted from Charlie Kirk. This was back in 2025. It's not Islamophobia, he writes, to notice that a man who wants to globalize the Intifada is about to run America's largest and once greatest city. It's not Islamophobia to notice that Muslims want to import values into the West that seek to destabilize our civilization. He writes, it's cultural suicide to stay silent. What I've noticed, and let's talk about this for a little bit today, what I've noticed is that there is a growing boldness among some of our social commentators, among some of our political leaders, to actually call this out for what it is. And it's kind of a wake-up call. I think we've watched what's happened in Europe, and anybody that's paying attention realizes that some of these European countries are hard to, there's no resemblance to who they were 20 years ago because of mass importation of Islamic people, immigration. Let's just talk about this. He says it's cultural suicide to stay silent. It's interesting when you speak up, you get this label of being an Islamophobe. But I love the Babylon Bee. They always nail it, and I want to go to a couple of their headlines of recent days. Here's one. Groundbreaking new study finds Islamophobia may be partially caused by Muslims killing people all the time. I mean, we laugh, but it's not funny. But you would think, okay, maybe I'm not an Islamophobe. Maybe the fact that every time I look at the news and it's another Muslim mass murder in the name of Allah, maybe there's something here. And maybe it's time we stop letting the leftist politicians and the leftist media shame us for simply speaking the obvious. Why are people concerned about Islam? Because Islam kills people. Second headline, Muhammad upset as Democrats keep calling Islam religion of peace. Obviously, if you read anything about what Islam is all about and what Muhammad is all about, you realize that it is not a religion of peace. That is a term that Muslims use to keep Christians and other people, Americans generally, silent about the dangers of Islam. And then lastly, I like this one too. Democrats warn that ban on Islamic immigration may delay global intifada. So, I don't know if I'm getting is that right, intifada?
Yeah.
It sounds good. Anyway, I don't know much about that. But basically what that is the Muslim idea of conquest, that they are going to dominate and take over the planet. And so I've noticed in recent times, we have, for instance, Matt Walsh writes, most people don't realize that the Muslim population in America has more than doubled after 9/11. That's amazing to me. Our government responded to 9/11 by mass importing the Arab world into our country. He said this is national suicide, no other term to describe it. Did you realize that after 9/11? A doubling of the Islamic population in America.
I wonder how much of that's importation or immigration, how much of that's reproduction.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's crazy to think that, I saw a picture of 9/11 and then a picture of Mandami sitting cross-legged in the office, which we just saw recently. This is part of that, hypocritical double standard again. And I want to talk a little bit about this. So here you see the Twin Towers collapsing and thousands of Americans dying. And again, this was an Islamic attack on America. And then you see a short time later, we've actually elected a full-blown Muslim mayor. They're sitting in their office after this crazy attack where, again, two young people who live in $1 million home, whose parents have been very successful and welcomed into America. So these are teenagers or young adults that tried to throw a bomb in the midst of a peaceful protest on the streets of New York to kill people, homemade bombs, while they're chanting, praise to Allah. Let's talk a little bit about the double standard and the failure of pluralism. Pluralism basically says all religions should be treated the same, et cetera, et cetera. And we need to be open-minded and tolerant and all this. And at the same time, the left is always criticizing any expression of public faith of Christianity. So Pete Hegseth recently was being attacked because he has started a kind of a lunchtime prayer meeting once a month at the Pentagon. Again, this is during lunchtime. It's not during office hours, work hours. No way are the taxpayers underwriting this. It's during free time, and the left had a hissy fit about that. Or we get called, Christian nationalists. But at the same time, you have the mayor of the largest city in America having a Muslim gathering and a Muslim celebration, a Muslim time of prayer, and the left cannot condemn that. Because of their pluralism, but they have no problem condemning you or I if we have any public expression of faith. What's behind all of that craziness? Because I think it's a clear double standard that we're living with here.
Well, I mean, it's really not about pluralism because we know pluralism leads to might is right. So it's really about power. And it's really about grabbing as much power as possible. I think one of the reasons why the left will not condemn something like that, whereas they're condemned like prayer meeting, is because they have a united enemy, which is like the conservative right. So they're united with whoever. They're united with the Iranians to attack to make sure that the conservative right will lose because it's a power game. Now on the other front is Islam is all about power. Now, what's confusing about Islam is there are some practitioners of Islam who don't practice all of it. They just practice some of it, and they're considered peaceful because they just kind of ignore the original, the doctrinal teaching, which I'm not an expert in Islam. But
or we would call them backslidden. If they were Christians, we'd call them backslidden.
Right. So that's where it's confusing to some people because there are some peaceful Islamists who they just don't follow all the teaching, or they follow some of the teaching, which, I mean, I get it. I mean, not everyone hears their religion. But there are others who adhere to all of it, and it gets very confusing. But Islam is about power, whereas Christianity is the opposite of that. Is about surrendering your life, and therefore, in a pluralistic society in which might means right, the religion is that it's all about power is going to shine through and it's going to take over everything.
Right.
Because there is no absolute truth in our culture. Well, at least we're in the culture of that.
Well, it's funny because the secularists would say again that there is no absolute truth, but that's not what our Islamic neighbors say. They absolutely believe there's absolute truth, and that absolute truth came from the Prophet Muhammad, was revealed to him. And when you read the Quran and you read some of the horrific things that are going on in the name of Islam, I think this is a distinction that we need to make. We need to, as Christians, we need to think deeply about worldview, and not about this nice person I work with who happens to be a Muslim at work. We're not condemning a nice person at work. We're condemning Islam. We're condemning the teaching of Islam as dangerous, and I think that's been incredibly pointed out. This is what Ali Bestaki, who also wrote the book Toxic Empathy, a great book talking about what happens when empathy is not rooted in absolute truth. She writes 2 Islamic terrorist attacks in one day, 4 in 3 weeks. She writes, I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, we've made a mistake importing this ideology, again, not people, ideology, people who hold an ideology into our country. She says putting a pause on immigration is literally the least radical and the most obvious option we could take right now. So as soon as President Trump or anybody suggests in Congress that we should probably put a halt on immigration from Muslim countries, instantly the gaslighting happens. And she's tongue-in-cheek basically saying, maybe if there are people here whose ideology is kill America, maybe we should just put a pause, tap the brakes. What do you think about some of this policy that's being put forth right now to kind of...
I think the problem is many of the politicians don't care about that. What they care is about importing votes. They care about, again, let's just be real. This is not even the right or left issue. In the pluralistic society, which is where we're at, it's about power. You got to see it through that lens. When you want power, what you want is, if you're the opposition party, you want chaos. You want things to be messy. You want crazy headlines. Chaos causes disorder. There's study that shows that chaos lets the opposition party win. And you also want votes. So you're making an assumption that all our elected politicians want things to be peaceful, want Americans to be healthy, want Americans to be happy, want Americans to be prosperous. That might be what they say. That's not what they actually vote for. We've seen that over and over again throughout history. It's not just in the current generation, in the past generation. So by that perspective, why wouldn't we want to import different ideology and different values, because it causes chaos?
Right.
What do you think happened in Europe? That's exactly what's going on in Europe. They want power, so they import people with completely different value and culture because they get the votes.
Create chaos, then it's a problem you created, and then you come in with the solution on the other hand to fix the problem.
But maybe you just say, hey, there's actually no problem where you get all these votes from people who are going to vote for you because, you're the one who wants to keep them there.
Well, and I thought this is interesting too. Will Kane, he said this month, the Austin shooter, a naturalized citizen. The Old Dominion shooter, natural citizen. The New York City teen bombers, children of naturalized citizens. Michigan synagogue attack, naturalized citizen. He asked the question, I think it's a good question, who are we giving citizenship to in America? And he says, not only do we have an illegal immigration problem, we have a legal immigration problem. We are allowing people to legally immigrate here who do not share our values and have no intention on assimilation. What's the young man that's been going around exposing all the Somali?
Nick Shirley.
Nick Shirley. I just saw a video of Nick Shirley where he was up, I think, in Dearborn, Michigan, which is a large Muslim population. And he's going up to a group of young men on the street, young Muslim men, and he said, hey, if America got in a war with, Iran or whatever other Muslim country, what side of the battle would you be on? And it was terrifying. Basically, these young men said, at the end of the day, we have to follow our book. We have to follow the Quran, and we would have to side with Islam. They're here in our country, and they might not be committing any kind of crimes, but when it comes to war and they have to make a choice, their choice is not America. Their choice is Islam. And so these, I think, are really, really good questions. Representative Roy Chip Roy said this on the House floor. Why are we importing people who are deeply at odds with the values of our country and Western civilization? Again, great question to ask.
The problem is he's assuming that the values have been decided. Of course, the left will say that is our value. Our value is pluralism.
Well, and this is what's scary about that being a value. You know, when you reject God and you reject Scripture and you reject transcendent truth with a capital T, then you fall into cultural truth. So we're going to support Hindus and Muslims and fill in the blank, Buddhists, whatever your religion is, just because our values say we should love and support and respect all ideas. Here's the problem. Here's somebody who downloaded Ayatollah Khomeini's Manual of Islamic Law on page 229, volume 3. Quote, intercourse with a woman is not allowed unless she attains the age of 9 years, regardless whether the marriage is permanent or temporary. So basically, this is pedophilia. This is grown adult men, having sex with children, not only girls but young boys, which is again a rampant problem in that culture. Some of the other stuff that I printed off here in terms of, I'm trying to find where it's at, but it was absolutely disgusting in terms of the right for a Muslim to rape a woman who is a non-Muslim, that is acceptable in their culture, or to have that person as a sexual slave. This is what Islam teaches. This is what Muslims believe. There might be those who don't practice that or are quiet about it, but this is the overt teaching of Islam. And this is sick. I mean, this is incompatible with Western values and civilization, certainly with Scripture, and this is what's going on. So for all the women out here who are feminists, it's like, where is your voice screaming against this? When you see pictures of ladies covered from head to toe with black gowns on with a little isolate to see out of, and you see this type of oppression, it's like, where's your voice? But there is no voice because there's no moral basis for any outrage because they're completely neutered. They have no basis to point to anything as wrong. And so as soon as you say this is sick, this is perverted, we need to get these people out of our country, all the left has is name calling. Well, you're an Islamophobe, or you're this, or you're that. This is disgusting, and people are finally saying, "Hey, we need to do something about this." I've appreciated Andy Ogles, who's a representative from Tennessee. He says an armed Lebanese migrant rams his car into a synagogue in your city this week, referring to one of the Minnesota lawmakers. So he could kill people because the Muslim faith commands him to kill people. And then he asks, are you tone deaf? And the response from that representative was, hate has no place in our country, especially in Congress. It's like, what does that even mean? You allowed this guy to hatefully drive in and murder people in your own country, but when you react against that, then you're called the hater. I mean, it's completely upside down moral thinking. He went on to say, Andy Ogles again, Representative Ogles, mic drops every Democrat who is furious about his, quote, anti-Muslim rhetoric. He says, I don't care about dangerous rhetoric. The threat is dangerous Muslims. I like that quote because it's not about the rhetoric. It's about the actual behavior of people who are committing these heinous crimes. Here's a meme I saw that I thought was funny, but nails it. He says, imagine a religion whose followers admit they want to kill you, but they say you have a phobia if you don't want to be killed. That's the kind of logic we're dealing with. This is what I was looking for. This is outrageous. According to the interpretation of Islamic law below, there should be no punishment for raping a girl under 9, and it is no sin to molest even an infant. He goes on to say that if a man rapes his child bride and her genitals tear completely, she may still be considered his wife, and he may still have complete rights to her. He said this is the ideology that we're importing in droves. I mean, so we're talking about child sexual abuse being blessed under the Quran. Again, this should be shocking to anybody. I don't care whether you're a left or right. I don't care who you are. But back to your point, if you're driven by power, I guess you don't care about these kind of atrocities as long as you can stay in power and get votes. But eventually, we're going to get eaten alive by people who do not share even these pluralistic views of society. I mean, Islam is completely incompatible with all these things that even with the logic that the left is using, eventually they're going to get into such a place of power that all of those people are going to get destroyed in the process because they have no respect for you either, even though right now they will cohabitate with you. But anyway, it's just revolting to me to think this kind of behavior is happening day in, day out in Islamic countries, and that we're importing it here. I've appreciated Tommy Tuberville. He's a senator from Alabama. He said in the last week alone, we've seen 3 terrorist attacks by radical Islamists across the U.S. And when I say the enemy is inside the gates, I mean it. We are at war, and unlike my Democrat colleagues who are clutching their pearls, I won't back down. He says Democrats are calling me a racist for speaking the truth about radical Islam, but it isn't about race. He says it's a death cult that teaches its followers to kill Americans. To be clear, he said, I did not suggest Islamists are the enemies. I said it plainly. Let's talk a little bit about that, this pearl clutching from the Democrats when he says the enemies are inside of our gates and that this isn't about race, it's about a death cult. I think he's hitting it right on the head. And I think from a worldview perspective, we've got to recognize that their ideology is a death cult. They hate us. They hate America. They hate Christian values. They hate Jews. They hate anybody from that Judeo-Christian, tradition. So it's not personal. It's not about the color of your skin. It's not about what country you come from. It's about the ideology that you embrace. So what do you think about a U.S. senator? Of course, he's getting all kinds of heat and pressure to recant his words. But he's not backing down, and I'm seeing this happen. And again, there's a political risk here because most politicians want to stay in power, and they don't want to say the truth if it's going to cost them. But he's saying it. Is Islam a death cult? And are we right in suggesting that we need to do something about it?
Yeah, it's interesting how after all these years since 9/11, we something like this, especially after these attacks that happened. I feel like a decade ago, after these attacks were happened, everyone would be saying it.
Well, remember what happened after 9/11?
Yeah.
That united our country, at least momentarily. Remember when the Congress was united on the steps of the Capitol, and it was a time of a surge of patriotism and kind of a rallying around a common enemy. We recognized that this was an enemy. But now the enemy is our friends in terms of we're turning the blind eye to some of the clear teaching and behavior. We're ignoring the attacks, innocent Americans being murdered in the name of Allah. In fact, the one guy was wearing a T-shirt, "Property of Allah." How much more? And then our media doesn't even mention anything about their ideology or their religious background, because again, pluralism doesn't allow you to make any moral judgments against anybody. Everybody's on the coexist bumper sticker. We're all going to live happily ever after. So I like the fact here. He says this. He says, I don't give a rip about being politically correct. Innocent Americans are being gunned down in the streets almost daily by radical Islamists whose, quote, religion teaches them that it's righteous to kill Christians. He says, I won't be silenced about this. He says, calling radical Islam out for being a cult doesn't make you an Islamophobe. Radical Islamists chant death to America and would love to see every Christian and Jew murdered. Under Sharia law, if you're not a Muslim, you are the enemy. Under Sharia law, minorities are persecuted. Under Sharia law, women are sold, raped, and trafficked. Don't believe me? Read it for yourself. Radical Islam is not compatible with the Constitution and has no place in America. And he says, I won't be silenced on this. I love that approach. He's calling it as it is. And, we're seeing a push now when these Muslim communities get a certain critical mass then they began to take their faith out in the streets. They began to shut down, streets for daily prayer, and they began blaring their prayers from the loudspeakers. Again, a pluralist has no ability to even criticize that, let alone stop it. So unless we get back to our roots, unless we understand the Christian heritage upon which this nation was founded, we're going to see this continue to grow and grow and grow. And now there's the push, of course, for Sharia law, where Muslims are saying we don't want to be governed by the Constitution. We want to be governed by our own law. And to which I think we would say, well, then your beliefs are fundamentally incompatible with our system of government, and you should probably leave, preferably willingly. But if not willingly, you should be deported. This seems to be radical among our lefties, but not so radical for anybody with common sense and who doesn't want to be the next victim of some bombing or attack. And we're not being irrational or knee-jerk or emotional when we're saying these things, because we've got the receipts. I mean, it's happening every day in America, and it's happening on a more regular basis. So I just want to say, great job, guys. And I feel like, again, they're not backing down. And I feel like they're speaking for most Americans who are very frustrated that we've allowed this to happen, especially because we're able to see what's going on to our friends right across the pond over in Europe. So what about that? I mean, we were shocked that the SAVE Act can't get passed, which simply says you have to be a citizen to vote, let alone people pushing right now for Sharia law in America. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar who's pushing. Are they pushing on the state level? Not on the federal level.
Well, in these areas where there are large, populations of Muslims,
like on city level,
basically they're saying, we want to be governed by Sharia law. And what's sad is, again, the Democratic Party, there's space for them to embrace all of this, and so politicians are finally coming out and saying, no way are we allowing this, and pointing out the fact that this is incompatible. In fact, I had another, printout I was going to bring in that actually highlighted what Sharia law believes and how it's completely incompatible with our Constitution. So it literally is a civil war. I think when they say we're at war and the enemy is within, I think they're accurate. It is a civil war of worldviews that are fundamentally incompatible, and something's got to give. And this is why, I guess we can close with this. This is why when we're advocating for political involvement, it's actually to try to solve things at a political level before civil war breaks out and before we're actually in a war in our own nation. We need good people. We need to get a majority of people who share a Christian worldview and who will begin to legislate according to that worldview. This creates peace in our culture. So it's not about being political. If you love peace, if you love freedom, if you love your nation, then you want to be engaged to make sure you don't completely lose it. And I really feel like that's kind of where we're at as a nation right now is, it's time to get off the fence. It's time to get involved. Yes, there's sacrifices and all these things, but it's time to fight. And I mean, from a godly Christian perspective, we're not talking about bullets and guns. We're talking about fighting ideologies that are wicked and dangerous. One last thing here from a man by the name of Damani Felder. It's not racist to say radical Islam is incompatible with America because radical Islam isn't a race, it's an ideology, and that ideology does not mesh with Western values. This is just a fact. I think it is a fact. I think we're seeing it more and more clearly, and I'm glad, that we have some of our leaders speaking out. I will say this too, we shouldn't rely on our politicians to be the leading prophetic voices. The church should be the leading prophetic voice, and we need to be speaking about these things from our pulpit. So, and we intend to do so. We're looking to do a conference and on it, radical Islam, and I don't even want to use the word radical. It's just Islam. It's what Islam teaches, and kind of be a voice for righteousness and a voice for truth as it relates to this invasion in our own nation. So, more coming on that, but something why we're bringing it up on our podcast. I think it's something we need to be aware of, and we need to start being vocal about, and we need to, the best way to begin fighting these battles is right in our local backyard, in our school boards and local officials and those types of things. So it's time to get involved and time to spread the truth about Jesus, because it is good news compared to the bad news of Islam, that's for sure. So, all right, we'll look forward to seeing you guys next Thursday. Thanks for being with us today. We love and appreciate your comments. Make sure you respond, and we'd love to respond back to you, give us feedback. But we're grateful to be with you. Thanks so much. Have a great day.